Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a big, very welcome to the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga. It's very nice to see you here this morning for the event that we have here together with the European Commission representation here in Latvia. Here today, visiting us to the left of me, Jirki Katainenu. He is Commissioner for the European Union. He's Vice President in the Commission, and he's Commissioner for the things that I like very much. It's jobs, growth, investment, and competitiveness. And before that, actually, he served as Prime Minister of Finland, so I think we have an interesting capacity here to talk to us today. And when I say to talk, that's not exactly what I mean. Many of you, can I see from the audience, are quite used to coming to this room to hear some presentation. It's slightly different today. It's more like a dialogue. It's a dialogue with the European Union. The European Commission reaches out to us in its 28 member states, in this case, to discuss the big investment plan that is coming out of the European Union. We're talking about 15 billion euros. It's sort of roughly 14 times Latvian GDP. Not all the money is going to end up here, of course, but still a big chunk of that might be, and that might be very good for the development, of course, of this country. So we will do it in a slightly different way. We're not talking about, as I said, a presentation today. That's also why we have chosen, especially for the presenter, but also for the moderator, me, to sit in a slightly more comfy way. I hope you don't mind, and I hope you feel comfortable where you sit. So we instead will have 3 rounds of discussion about this here investment plan, 3 rounds where the Commissioner will make a short introductory presentation, and then the question, quite frankly, is to have questions from you, from the audience, that will then be directed towards the Commissioner. So sort of the framework is 3 times 20 minutes as we move along. I will then now go down, sit here next to the Commissioner, a few more words, and then we will start with the first part of our discussion today. And our first part, and then I would be very happy to give the floor to you, Mr. Commissioner. That is sort of to give you a little bit background, sort of the rationale behind this investment plan that is coming out of the European Union, out of the European Commission. So please, let's hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for organizing this citizens' dialogue. I'm visiting all the 28 member states by the end of September. Latvia is 21st country in which I have visited, or I'm visiting from the beginning of the year. The reason why I'm on the road is to explain what kind of new elements there are available for member states, and especially for private sector, to use in order to boost investment and job creation, and especially to strengthen competitiveness. If we look at the European economy at the moment, there are positive elements, but then there are shortages. The positive element is that almost all the countries, maybe excluding Greece, but the rest of the European EU member states will grow this year. This is the first year which we see that all the member states are more or less growing. The second thing is that we have achieved financial stability. There is lots of liquidity everywhere. We are not lacking of liquidity. And due to the fact that many member states have done very decisive reforms, including budget consolidation, the certainty and confidence has raised. Also, if you look at the private consumption, it's approximately at the same level as it was 2007. But one thing which is missing, still missing, is investment. If you compare today's investment level or volume, if you compare it to the volume in 2007, we are lagging behind some 15% in the EU. In money, it means 300 billion per year. And this is very, I would say, even dangerous development, because investments are precondition for improving competitiveness, external competitiveness, and also it's a precondition for creating jobs in the future. So investment is not only a stimulus type of thing, but it means that we are investing in our future, either to research and development or physical infrastructure, or then helping SMEs to get financing. In our investment plan, there are three elements, three parts. The most important part, at least according to my mind, is deepening and widening of internal market. We still have very national market in at least in three areas. The first one is digital market. So we still have 28 different copyright regimes and VAT regimes and data protection laws. And it means that we don't have harmonized internal market in digital commerce. The second area, which is problematic, is the energy market. We are lacking of energy interconnectors between the countries. Many countries are heavily dependent on only one gas supplier, or electricity doesn't go across the border, even if there were demand and supply. And also the regulation, energy regulation is very national. So we will, in both areas, the Commission will propose concrete measures how to further integrate the European market. Andrus Ansip, former Prime Minister of Estonia, who is in charge of digital single market, will do together with Günther Oettinger concrete proposals how to harmonize digital single market. And Maros Sefcovic, who is by the way today here in Riga, who is a Vice President in charge of Energy Market Union, he will present together with Miguel Arias Cañete, the Spanish Commissioner, concrete proposals how to further integrate energy market. And the third element is capital market. There Jonathan Hill, my Commissioner colleague, who is in charge of financial services, will do concrete proposals how to integrate capital market. The second element in the plan is to create a project portal. It means that we will create by the summer break, we'll create a kind of website portal for infrastructure projects in order to give better visibility for public and private projects, and further make it easier for private investors to find concrete projects to which they can participate. The third element, and probably the most discussed element in the investment plan, is new risk fund called EFSI, European Fund for Strategic Investment. And this fund will provide loans, equity, quasi-equity financing, and venture capital and guarantees to private investors. It finances private and public-private partnership projects, but not pure public projects. And there are two strands. The first one is SME financing. For instance, in Latvia's case, there should be some local intermediary which can be either commercial bank or public investment fund or bank or venture capital, private venture capital fund, which can provide risk financing from EFSI and further distribute it to Latvian SMEs. And the second strand is infrastructure, which means that EFSI will co-finance private projects and share the risk of private investor. And by doing so, we want to mobilize private resources to real economy. I will stop here just telling that the financing volume of the new fund, EFSI, is 60 billion in 3 years period, and this is supposed to mobilize around 250 billion from private sector into real economy. There's been some talks whether we are using too generous or too optimistic leverage assumption, but if you compare this to European investment banks normal lending and financing leverage, it's a bit smaller or more moderate. In the EIP financing, the leverage ratio is usually times 18, and now we are talking about times 15. So this is what we are doing. We will deliver very fast. Everything should be up and running in September, and we just want to make sure that during the roadshow that the private sector really understand what are the new opportunities, because how much Latvia will benefit from the EFSI depends on the private sector's activity.
Thank you very much indeed. That's sort of the first part then, and we will go deeper with the second and the third part. The second part will be of interest to very many people, because that's how do you get the money, right? And the third part will be, I think, a little bit more Latvia specific and also about SMEs. So questions that I welcome right now should be a little bit more general, or perhaps they should be, if it's in terms of Latvia, it should be more infrastructure related, let's say about energy. And those who do not know my rules, they are the same as always. If you have a question, please let me know. Don't speak before you get the microphone, because everything is being live streamed. Give me your name, give me your affiliation, and only a question is allowed, no comments, because we don't have much time, and we are interested in questions because we're interested in answers also. So please, if you have a question with these strict rules, sorry about that, then let me know, and we have people with microphones who are very happy to let you have their microphones, and there must be a reason for why you came here today.
Yeah. There's a gentleman. There's.
Very short question. Here you need the microphone.
Labdien! Es esmu Artūrs Malta, Latvijas lauksaimniecības kameras priekšsēdētājs. Un man ir, es jau uzrakstīju jau elektroniski tos savus jautājumus, es atkārtošu varbūt to pašu pirmo. Vai Eiropas komisija iedodot naudu Latvijas valdībai, kas viņus ieskaita savos ieņēmumos, kontrolē, kur tā nauda paliek?
Sorry, the translation did not work, so I couldn't hear a thing.
Try again, please.
Labdien vēlreiz. Es esmu Artūrs Malta, Latvijas lauksaimniecības kameras priekšsēdētājs un zemnieks no Kabeles pagasta. Man ir jautājums, ko es jau uzrakstīju iepriekš elektroniski. Mans jautājums ir, Eiropas Savienība iedod naudu, valdība atbilstoši ministra kabineta noteikumu 130 noteikumiem 11. pantam naudu ieskaita budžetā, ieņēmumos. Kā Eiropas Savienība kontrolē šīs naudas izlietošanu mērķiem, jā, tas bija domāts vidējiem maziem uzņēmumiem. Es jau 5. gads nevaru saņemt, lai gatavs projekts, gatavs darba vietas un gatavu ražošanu. Un es nevaru saņemt nekādu, jo Latvijā nav nevienas bankas. Paldies.
Thank you very much. You raised a very important question, because the governments basically doesn't play any role in when talking about EFSI. Only if there are larger infrastructure projects which are based on PPP structure, then the local authorities or governments has a role. But when talking about small and medium-sized business financing, there need to be local intermediary which is providing or which is applying resources from EFSI, and this intermediary will be either private venture capital fund or commercial bank, or then, of course, if there are public SME funds or investment funds or investment bank, which I think there is one in Latvia. It could also apply resources from EFSI and further distribute it according to their own assessment to SMEs. What interests us or the EFSI is that the conditions how the local intermediary selects SMEs when financing must be sustainable, and the fund want to know beforehand what is the selection process, who will get financing and who will not. But basically, when talking about SME financing, it's the government doesn't play basically any role. Only if there is a public fund which is providing resources further to SMEs. When talking about infrastructure projects, then it's up to the companies to apply resources from EFSI, or another option. Maybe we discuss this later, but there can be also national investment platforms which can apply risk financing for FC and further distribute it to private sector.
Yes, please. And we need the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Andreja Šinska, and I'm representing Latvia's Gaza. And I have a question, naturally, about energy infrastructure projects. And you rightly mentioned that it's very important to have all interconnections in place in Europe in order to have a joint European energy market. One of the most important projects in this respect is Lithuanian-Polish interconnection project, so-called GIPL project. As you know, that this project has been selected for financing from infrastructure fund. However, because of project promoters think that money is not sufficient for implementation of this project, signing of agreements with the project promoters is kind of postponed. It's very difficult. Do you personally think that Juncker Fund can promote in somehow and show a way out of this deadlock? Yeah. Thank you.
I want to make one disclaimer. I'm not the one who is selecting the projects. And whatever I say here regarding one or individual projects, it cannot be seen as a approval or disapproval, because the fund itself will select the project. But energy interconnectors is one of the priority areas of the investment fund. There are energy connections, energy efficiency, renewable investments, digital infrastructure, research infrastructure, and social infrastructure, which are kind of priority areas. Depending on what is the challenge of this particular program, it may qualify with EFSI financing. In this project or this kind of projects, the countries or project promoters can use structural funds as a co-financing element. Of course, there should be, if FC money is needed, there should be private money involved in investment. And then, of course, EIB, the European Investment Bank, as a part of its normal operations, could participate. So only if the project is higher risk private sector or higher risk public-private partnership project, it can qualify EFSI criteria. But in principle, this project sounds like the one what the Commission would like to support, because we need, as you said, interconnectors in order to create energy market. It's not only about energy security, even though this is a very important factor, but it's also, we need connectors because we want to create a market where the client has freedom of choice where to buy gas.
Okay, third question, Baiba.
My question is such, I'm Professor Barbara from Latvian Academy of Sciences, and you described just now 3 elements of that plan. What is your opinion or view? Are they all 3 on equal importance, or some for the energy, what will be the first part, it will be more important than others?
When looking at how much money will be allocated to different areas, it depends on the demand, basically on demand. So we don't have thematic pre-allocation, how much money will be used for research and how much money to energy. It depends on the demand. But personally, if I could wish something, I would like to see a lot of R&D related investment there, because this is the way we can support the potential growth in the future and really address the shortages in competitiveness. Of course, energy sector is important, and when building a digital single market, we need digital infrastructure. But I guess those are the most obvious areas from which we can get good projects. But this is my message to private sector or the companies and SMEs that now there is more patient financing for research-related projects also.
Very good. Then perhaps go to, if you have some questions still about this, just keep them waiting. We shall see how many we can get through. But otherwise, I would like to give you the floor again, then going a little bit more into detail about this that I guess everybody wants to know. How do you get this money? Rules of the game, how to apply, or which projects will be awarded and on what basis. So again, if you have some words about that first, and then we'll see if that arises some questions.
Yes, putting it very concrete way. The first example, if there is a company which is planning to invest in something, let's say there's an industrial company which are planning to do new innovations or do a major investment, whatever the area we are talking about, they can directly apply resources from EFSI. They can already today call to European Investment Bank and present the investment plan, and the banks start analyzing it. And once EFSI is up and running, the EFSI's management analyzes whether the investment can get EU guarantee or not. Or if there is a major, bigger scale energy interconnector, the project promoter can directly apply to EIB. So the governments are not the gatekeepers. You don't need to get approval from public authorities if you want to get financing from EFSI. The second example is SME financing. There, the local intermediary, which can be a commercial bank or venture capital fund or a public SME fund, they can already today call to European Investment Fund, which is a subsidiary of European Investment Bank, which is dealing with SME financing, and ask or say that we are ready to raise funds in this and this much and provide it to Latvian SMEs. And the third element or example is to establish a national or regional investment platform. The synonym to platform is special purpose vehicle. Both sounds very bureaucratic, but basically it means that, for instance, public investment fund will dedicate some resources to higher risk private sector projects, and they will apply risk financing from EFSI, and they can negotiate, for instance, with institutional investors like pension funds or insurance companies if they want to participate into the plan or the platform. And then the platform itself selects the projects which can get financing. So this is what is happening in many European countries at the moment. Either regions or government or the national promotional banks are establishing, together with private sector, these kind of platforms. So they usually focuses on SME financing or then to infrastructure. In France, there is this kind of platform which will focus on energy efficiency investment. In some other countries, they are planning to establish a platform for small hotel owners' needs. There are countries in which the financing constraints are enormous and the cost of money is very, very high, but there is a need to renovate, for instance, hotels. So the special purpose vehicle will pool big amount of this kind of small size investment together and apply risk financing for EFSI and further distribute it to the companies. So these are the elements. If there are, my final point, if there are, and once there are private investments like projects and the companies applying resources from EFSI, the management of the fund will analyze whether the project is economically viable, whether it can get financing from elsewhere. If that is the case, then the project can get financing from EFSI. But if it's economically viable, higher risk project, but due to the risk profile, it's difficult to get all the financing from the market, then EFSI can do a positive assessment and finance partially the project. So there's no political interference in the selection process. So it's purely professional assessment by the investment committee of the fund.
No political interference?
Not at all.
That sounds quite new in this country, but we shall see, right?
Yeah.
We also have some questions from the outside, some questions that were raised earlier, but let's see. Yes, please.
I'm Rolands Feldmanis. Does it work? I'm Rolands Feldmanis, Latvian and Business Angels Network. Are there any restrictions for the projects, for example, for real estate, for oil processing, and what is the expected return on investment or IRR for the projects which will be accepted, probably accepted at European Investment Bank? Or for other financing tools, whatever, related to the European Union?
Yeah, as I said before, the projects can get co-financing element from the other European financing tools like structural funds, even in the case where EFSI comes as a co-financer. The rules will be set, or the investment, the management of the board will set the investment policy guidelines, but also in the regulation it's quite detailed to what kind of purposes the fund can be used. Mostly the projects should support the other policy areas which are important for the EU, like they are quite broad, or the definition is quite broad. We are talking about energy efficiency, renewable energy, energy security, etc., and digital infrastructure. So yeah, it's there are limitations, but they are not very nitty-gritty regulations. What kind of projects can get financing and what cannot. But mostly, or always, of course, the project must be economically viable. So EFSI will not finance dead projects, but because our basic analysis is that there is plenty of liquidity around everywhere, and that's why we don't want to pump more public money to the market. And only thing we want to do is to address market failure in the areas where we can find one, and risk financing is one. So that's why EFSI finance high-risk private sector projects. But I would like to underline the importance of national investment platforms, because it's the way EFSI can outsource its work, and it's the way how we can use local expertise when dealing with SMEs or when dealing with smaller size projects. So if there are private financiers or private financiers together with public authorities consider to establish Latvian investment platform which concentrates on the areas you select yourself. Yeah, please continue.
I just want to clarify approximately about this expected rate of return to understand if I understand you correctly. So basically you provide some additional financing to the bank's financing or some private financing. In other words, it means that you are like a quasi banker. Just I don't get how much you expect from the project. For example, some banks expect that your return on equity is, or just from the project is above 10% per annum. Some venture capitalists expect 15% or even more. What is your expectations for the project? 5% maybe, lower?
EIB has its own pricing policy, and it's purely up to the EIB to decide the pricing and return expectations. But what added value EFSI will bring is risk financing. So basically there's, if there are losses, the fund will suffer the first hit. And this is the new element what EIB will do. So the overall level of risk profile will be similar as it is in EIB's special operations. So EIB has a special category for high-risk private sector projects, and there they are ready to take more risk and partially reduce the return expectations. So this is the added value what the fund is providing.
Very good. I also have a question from the outside, as I mentioned, and one of them I think there could be quite interesting to ask. That's more like the scope of this here, because from another educational establishment here, the Raisiba, somebody's been asking, would you also fund something that is in culture or arts? Yeah, I don't know, so yeah. I like the answer also, to hear the answer. But
well, I wouldn't like to say categorically not, because there can always be some angle in cultural or art investment which relates to competitiveness or commercial use. But I would be very surprised if there were many private investment in this side which really would qualify. But not categorically. I mean, art and design, they are many times part of the overall business case, and some, in that case, indirectly, EFSI could participate, but not as a primary. EFSI is not as a primary investment or financing source for this kind of investment.
I think that was the diplomatic way of saying no. But there we are. But if I could allow myself one question, then that could be, what about education? Yeah.
Education is possible, again, if there are private or public-private partnership. So, especially in research sector, I expect quite a lot of projects. I have visited in many universities during my roadshow, and there are good projects which are financed partially by public authorities, but also by private sector, especially in applied research sector. This is the case. Also education, depending on the model how the project is structured.
Okay. We have one there at the top.
Thank you. Andres Semyonovs from Swedbank. I still have a question in terms of the expected rate of return. How would you rate the project? Is it complementary to bank lending or more of a substitute in terms of the expected return, the risk profile that you will accept in those lines?
It's more like a complementary to private financing, because EFSI doesn't want to crowd out private financing. It's just a risk fund which helps private investors and private financiers to participate to the projects by sharing the risk. As I said before, the pricing will depend on the EIB's pricing policy. And of course, there are different categories how they will price the projects or financing. So if you have some special projects in your mind, the EIB will be the right source for additional information.
Thank you. Else at the moment? Okay, let's hear one, yeah?
Nu, jautājums ir tāds, es dzirdēju, SEB banka, Eiropas Savienība par šiem 5 gadiem es esmu ļoti labi izpētījis. Nauda atnāk uz Latviju. Bijušais ekonomikas ministrs ieskaitīja naudu SEB un Svetbankā, vienā 44 miljonus, otrā 60 miljonus. Nauda bija nākusi no EIB, no bankas, no Luksemburgas, tieši mazajiem un vidējiem uzņēmumiem. Šo naudiņu bankas pēdējiem datiem, ko man deva profesors Zelgals, mums ir samazinās banku kredīts ražošanā. Bet tādā pašā laikā viņu banku peļņi pieaugusi.
What's the question?
Tas jābūt skaidrībā. Ministrs kungs, jābūt skaidrībā. To pašā laikā 30% ir pieaugusi banku peļņa. Es nesaukšu viņus par bankām, viņi ir augļotāji, jo viņi neiesaistās ražošanā. Un tā ir būtiska starpība. Un kā mēs varam to naudiņu saņemt, ka to naudu aizskaita atpakaļ, un viss ir ok. Un otrs, ko es gribētu pateikt, ka pēdējā laikā ir 40 krimināllietas tajā laikā, ka nauda, kā viņi netiek liederīgi izmantot. 28. maijā es saņēmu no Bruseles informāciju, ka apstiprinātas 24 programmas, kuras ir domātas 40,000 darba vietas radīšanai un 700,000 mācību vietas radošanai. Mums slēdz skolas ciet, mums slēdz visu, ko ciet, jo nauda aiziet meitu uzņēmumos, kas ir mammas, ir bankas citās valstīs. Mums
Okay, I think we've heard the question. If the question is hidden somewhere in there, and if you have an answer to that,
un tādā pat laikā īpašums neatdod zemniekiem.
Well, actually, how much manufacturers can benefit depends on them, because they can apply resources from EFSI directly, and there is no any political allocation of this kind of resources. So this message is very clear. So the manufacturers can contact EIB directly.
okay, perhaps one more, if there is one, otherwise we go to number 3. But really, it should be questions only. We don't want comments for this here. Yes, please.
Daigauzīm Mēloks, Nasdaq Riga. How do you see the exit will take place? You have all those investments. How will the investors then get their returns?
Well, it's important to recognize that now we are talking about normal private sector investment. And EFSI's role is just co-finance the projects which cannot get all the financing from the market, or the financing costs are too high due to the risk profile. And the exits or returns depends on the contract, what the private investors are willing to do, and depending on the viability of the project. And there, it varies between the projects quite a lot. So EFSI is just, it's part of the bank, it's part of EIB, and it wants its money back, but it's sharing the private sector's risk. And all those expectations on return and exit depends on the project.
Okay. Then if we move to the third part, and again, if there's still some questions coming up about earlier parts, it's no problem at all. But moving to the third part, and that means going a little bit more SMEs again. You already mentioned something, but I think we would like a little bit more. We have quite a few of them here. But also what's in store of, quite frankly, we're interested in the Baltic countries here. We don't mind Portugal and Spain and so on, but we are very interested in what can you sort of, what's the scope for the Baltic countries of this year?
Yeah, there are two options for Baltic countries when talking about SME financing. The first option is, which can be complementary to each other. First option is that commercial banks or venture capital funds or public SME funds or investment funds apply some resources from EFSI and further provide it to local SMEs. The second option is to use, for instance, the Nordic Investment Bank as a regional investment platform for SME financing. I've been talking with the NIB, the Nordic Investment Bank, which operates in Baltic countries and also in Nordic countries, that if they would like to behave or be Baltic Sea region investment platform, it could play a remarkable role here. And they could also attract some private resources for SME financing. Everywhere I go, I always get the same feedback that there's plenty of liquidity. Most of the SMEs can get financing from banks when talking about loans, but there's lack of equity financing. So risk financing is something what the banks usually don't provide. And also when looking at venture capital market in Europe, it's not well-known fact that it's not that well developed comparing to American ones. So that's why our aim is to address the market failure in this sector. So if you look at the needs of innovative SMEs, which are doing R&D projects, they are usually running deficits for first years, and they would need equity or capital even more than loans. And this is something what EFSI will provide more than before. And we basically will double the amount of SME financing what EIF, the European Investment Fund, will offer.
Double, okay. Yeah. Have a question from the outside also from somebody called FlyCap, which I assume is a company, associated with venture capital, because you already mentioned venture capital, but they're interested in sort of programs of venture capital. And in this country, that's a little bit much to ask you for, but we only have you here today. So
yeah, concrete proposal or advice. If there's a venture capital fund who is interested in raising funds from public sources, just call to EIF. You can call there already today. And they have a good track record. They've been operating in venture capital side for years, and they know the business very well. So as I said, we will double the amount of firepower of EIF in SME financing. So one of the most efficient way to distribute venture capital or SME financing is to use local intermediaries like private venture capital funds. So please be active and be in contact to EIF already today.
But then again, yeah, okay, yes, please. Okay, I'll show you.
Thank you very much. My name is Adria Müller from the Hungarian Embassy here in Riga. Thank you for the presentation and thank you for the opportunity. You have mentioned in your introduction many times that basically the strength of the private sector is very important to use the FC. I'm sure that the European Commission has made a lot of evaluation as regards the strength of the private sector. How do you see, of course there is no such a requirement, but I'm sure that you have a kind of expectation. Are we going to face a kind of a different geographical balance of using of the FC, taking into account the strength of the private sector in different member states? Thank you.
Yeah, this is very often asked question. FC doesn't have any pre-allocations geographical pre-allocation, neither thematic pre-allocation. It depends on the demand. But at the same time, I have to say that in the FC regulation, we want to make sure that all the money is not used in 3, 4, 5 countries. We want to help all the member states, but it depends on the demand. One of the thing what we are doing at the moment is to help member states to establish those investment platforms, because it is the best way to and the most efficient way to use FC resources. There are different examples. I already mentioned this small hotel owner thing. This is one interpretation how FC resources can be used in one of our member states. Another example is that in one Central European country there are provinces who have sold or privatized, for instance, electric companies, and they have plenty of cash, and they would like to establish, together with the other regions of the country, the investment platform concentrating on R&D financing and mostly target to SME innovative SME financing. We are helping them to establish the platform. In France, they have it's not a plan anymore, but they already got pre-financing decision from EIB. They will concentrate on energy efficiency projects, meaning that there are 40,000 households who will get financing from the platform in which EIB's financing is bought, and they will provide also technical assistance how to renovate the houses, and they can get cheaper financing for these purposes. So there are plenty of opportunities, and that's why authorities should be creative, and also private sector should be creative how to use new resources, and we want to help different stakeholders in this respect.
Yes, please.
I just would like to know about these platforms. Is this platform sponsored by the bank or some financing? And how many these platforms are in the Europe working already right now?
I don't know exact figure, but there are plenty of platforms coming. There is not that many which are up and running already now, but we are helping many member states to establish ones. And the form varies a lot, depending on the demand. Some platforms are concentrated on some particular theme, like energy efficiency. There will also be cross-border platforms concentrating on energy connectors or energy investment. Then there will be some SME financing-related platforms. So it varies a lot. We have to tailor-made it.
Who is the one who is responsible for making a platform? It's on the government side or it's on a private initiative?
Both goes. In many cases, national promotional banks are the core players. They will dedicate some of their lending capacity to the projects which EFSI can finance. So again, we are talking about higher risk private sector projects. And to this platform, in some cases, some private investors are putting capital or their money also, and then the platform itself selects the projects. So they can be purely private platforms or public-private joint ventures, and public in a sense that if national promotional banks are seen as a public sector players. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Maybe I add one thing. If there are interests of having more information and having good examples, our representation of the Commission is here. Please contact him. Raise your hand. Okay. He's the contact person. We will help you to find the right person from the Commission or from the EIP to further develop your ideas. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Frank Arnouds, the Belgian ambassador in Latvia. I also have some questions on those platforms. It's still not completely clear for me whether they're not going to act as a kind of a filter and whether there's not a risk of some vested interests establishing their position through those platforms. For instance, giving the example, if in Latvia you would have a certain platform, is there not a risk that, for instance, if you have foreign investors from Belgium and they want to come up with a project here, that through those platforms there's a kind of filter that would rather favor local companies and local investors compared to foreign investors? And is there a risk, and how can you avoid that? Thank you.
All the investment, of course, should be in line with our competition policies. And maybe it's realistic to say that there's a risk, but hopefully it doesn't realize. So all the projects, as I said, should be in line with the competition policy and open for everything. So the platforms cannot be a new way to protect the local market. Instead, it should be open for everything. And EFSI regulation has very strict rules in this respect also. So actually, it's the same as what EIB has. So if EIB resources are used, then it must be open and transparent how it is used.
Thank you. I would like to raise one more. Come back to the question from Swedbank that was at the back row. This about that this here should be complementary. But then again, if you have, let's say, an SME, you have a good project, you go to Swedbank, and Swedbank thinks this is a good idea. Okay, then they will finance it. Many people here will say they're quite rather stingy at the moment in terms of financing, but let that rest. But who is it then that will go to this other financing then? Those that are being said no from Swedbank or from some of the other banks? It's a little bit unclear to me, actually.
Yeah, it's the European Investment Fund is operating in SME sector already now, and and they will they usually do fund-to-fund investments, and the funds who are operating in this field, they will do the decisions which are the SMEs which can qualify, or then it can be a commercial bank. And in this case, when talking about EFSI financing, it will focus more than before to equity financing, which seems to be quite a scarce resource almost everywhere. So banks can finance all the good projects by providing loans, but equity is something different, which is a bit different than normal debt financing.
Okay. Further questions? Yes, we just need the microphone. It's easier if you come down here, I think. It's not restricted area, so please.
My name is Igor Graurs. I'm rector of Transport and Telecommunication Institute. If from the beginning rules will be absolutely the same for all countries, of course we will be in very hard situation, because creation of platforms, which is something new for us, will be very hard, and a long time will be necessary for creation of efficient platforms. I don't ask you about rules. Rules are correct and the same for all. But what's your advice? Maybe it's better to try to cooperate with these old countries, with these countries which have experience in these directions, and maybe it will be more efficient. You talked about banks. I think Latvian commercial banks not yet ready to do it directly. We have quite bad experience from the middle of the 90s, and now there was quite a long period when our commercial banks was not involved in this process. Maybe easier it will be try to do it through banks which are located in Latvia, which know, and Baltics, which know our market, but have maybe deeper roots in this direction. I ask you only about your advice, your opinion about it.
What I'm going to say next may be not accurate, but the first idea which comes to my mind is that there's a public investment authority or fund here in Latvia. So basically one of the options could be to create a platform around it, to use it as an instrument. No need to establish a new instrument, which could take some time, as you said. So this instrument could be the one, and then another option which could either complement this or be separate. I would meet institutional investors and ask if they have some ideas, like pension funds or insurance companies, if they are interested in to invest in infrastructure, and if they are interested in to participate together with public sector to some of these operations. Then the Nordic Investment Bank could be a third option to use. It's already operating fund, and it could probably help to establish a special platform here, or just finance projects here and apply some risk financing from FC. Those are the first reactions which comes to my mind. But as I said, I'm not the best specialist what should be done here in Latvia, but could imagine that some of those could function.
Good. I just need to be sure about one thing. I'm not sure whether you mentioned it, perhaps you did, but otherwise I've just been slow. But in terms of allocation of all these funds, does it have anything to do with population or GDP of countries?
No.
Or is it first come, first, or rather best come, first served, or something like that?
Yeah. Exactly. So it functions exactly the same how European Investment Bank is operating. There is no pre-allocations of funding, and because FC is part of EIB, so it depends on the demand.
Okay, so demand driven, yeah. Okay, interesting. Yes, please.
My name is Valerijs Stūris. I'm from State President Chancellery. And the question could be very simple, I hope. If a payday loan platform will be created in Latvia, what's the reaction from Europe Union or Commission?
Which platform you meant?
Payday, or its own short credit loan?
SMS loans.
Okay. SMS loans, yes. Payday loans. Such platform, it's very efficient. They attract the money from very quickly.
As I said earlier, I cannot guarantee on financing on anywhere, but if you plan to benefit from EFSI in terms of SME financing, there is a need for a local intermediary, and I cannot say which one is the best, or which. If your idea is the best possible in the market.
This was a really good diplomatic answer because I'm not quite sure whether it was yes or no. But,
I don't have the answer to this question. I don't know.
No, but it's one of the big sort of local issues, definitely, right? Yeah. Very good. Yes, please.
Ojārs Kehris, Economist Association. I'm sorry because I missed few minutes and maybe I missed something important related to my question. But my question is, going a little bit back, how the money will be raised? And what could be the timetable? Because we heard that about 300 million or so on, but where we are right now with this and how the money will be raised. Thank you.
Yes. We just reached an agreement with the European Parliament and the Council, because I have to say that the Latvian presidency functioned extremely well. We reached an agreement which means that the European Parliament will approve the EFSI legislation 24th of June, and the fund should be up and running sometimes in September. But how it will function, it's a very important question. We will use part of the EU budget together with resources from EIB as a guarantee fund. The size of the guarantee fund is 21 billion. And this 21 billion is there for potential losses. So once there is cash in the guarantee fund, it enables EIB to raise funds in worth 60 billion or a bit more. And this 60 billion is a fresh investment capacity of EIB to high-risk private sector projects in 3 years' time period. And this 60 billion supposed to mobilize around 250 billion from private sector. So there is the overall leverage or multiplier effect is times 15. 21 billion capital or guarantee fund times 3 is 60 billion, which is the EIB's lending volume. And this is supposed to mobilize times 5, 250. So its overall figure is 350. Some people have criticized us, saying that it's unrealistic to have times 50 multiplier effect. But if you look at the EIB's normal operations, 3 years ago, member states capitalized EIB by 10 billion. And since that, they have invested this 10 billion, mobilizing 180 billion together. So the multiplier effect has been times 18. Now we are using a bit more moderate multiplier assumption because we are talking about higher risk projects. And of course nobody can guarantee it, but this is the best knowledge we have. Around something like this it should be. The more resources are used for SME side, the higher the multiplier effect is. Then, of course, long-term big energy projects there, the multiplier can be lower than this.
Okay, very good. We're coming sort of close to the end. I have a very strict program here that I'm trying to live up to. And that means just a few comments from myself and final comments by the Commissioner. I think sort of some of the takeaway I got from this here was that, yeah, that there's something out there for big companies, Latvia's Gada, for instance. For small companies, SMEs, there was something for venture. But also what I know is that I have to go home and read more about this. This is not easy stuff, certainly not for me. I don't know about you, but have to read more about it. And then what we also learned, what I think is important, certainly also to me, very demand-driven. So we're not protected here. So, let's try to be better than the Estonians, if possible. But I think there's also a little bit for the Commissioner, perhaps, to take away from some of the comments and questions here. And if I should mention only two of them, which are not surprising from here, but perhaps for somebody who comes from abroad, then it's this here that a concern about vested interests in terms of who gets which projects, but also the setting up of this platform. Several of you addressed that. And I'm also sort of curious and a little bit worried about that. And perhaps that's a little bit takeaway that you can bring back to the Commission as some sort of concern from here, but it might easily also be a concern in other countries. And I have this feeling that since you've been to more than about 20 countries already with this discussion, you might have heard something similar there already. But certainly from me, thank you very much for coming, and the final words are yours, please.
Thank you very much for this discussion, debate, and also for your final remarks. If I should summarize, I would like to raise a few points. The first one is, if you think there is a need for equity financing to SMEs, there should be some local intermediary, either the commercial bank or public bank or investment fund or private venture capital funds. The second, companies can apply resources without any public authorities' approval. Directly contact to EIB. You can call there already today. They have started to analyze the projects. And the third, it's worth being creative and try to devise how to establish either national or cross-border investment platforms which can concentrate on the area you yourself find the most crucial for Latvia. And there it's worth cooperating with private investors very closely and look if what kind of interests there are. And final point is that wherever I go, the institutional investors like insurance companies and pension funds are complaining that we are happy that the economic situation is more stable at the moment than a couple of years ago, but it also means that interest rates are too low for us. And they are looking for concrete infrastructure projects which they would like to finance. And this is another source for private resources if there are needs for this kind of project. So thank you very much for this discussion. I learned some new things here. I will bring the feedback to Commission, and let's hope there's a good start for new wave of investment in Latvia, and we are more than happy to help Latvians to establish or to benefit from EFSI. Thank you very much.